Now that Israel Adesanya is no longer going to be considered a top-level middleweight and cannot really add to his legacy to some substantial degree to the point where he can become the greatest middleweight of all time, I do think it's important, to now make this video and let everyone know why the end of career for these fighters doesn't actually negatively impact their legacy overall. Because I feel like a lot of people that hated Israel Adesanya are like using these losses now to be like, oh well, you know, he's never been that great. Even though for the time that Adesanya fought, he still has an all-time great resume. Now, where he ranks all-time, that's up to you, an interpretation of how good the opponents that he faced were. But if we just look at the run that he went on, like, we can see that his only loss before the losses to Alex Pereira, which he did end up getting back in mixed martial arts. The kickboxing losses don't mean anything, it's a different sport. He only had a loss to a light heavyweight champion in Jan Blachowicz. Other than that, for every single middleweight that stepped up, got stepped down to Israel Adesanya. And those were the top level middleweights for the time that Israel Adesanya fought. And that's the thing, like, his resume is still there. He beat Robert Whittaker, a great fighter, one of the 5 best middleweights of all time, for sure. Yoel Romero, you know, boring fight, but he got the job done. Paulo Costa, Marvin Vettori, Rob Whittaker in the rematch after Rob Whittaker went on a good run to get back to the title shot. And Jared Cannonier, an up-and-comer, well, I wouldn't say up-and-comer, he was old as dirt, but another new contender that ended up beating some good middleweights who were on good runs themselves. And that's for the most part Adesanya's run, and he also beat Alex Pereira after getting a loss to him. So for the most part, that is the run that Adesanya went. That run to me ended with the Sean Strickland loss. I think the losses were just too close to each other. Him losing to Strickland, losing to Pereira, losing to Blachowicz just a few fights before that. The resume of Adesanya still stands, but now I'm just going to quickly move on from this and tell you guys why the end of career really doesn't matter to some of these legacy conversations, because no time traveling argument makes any sense. Like, think about this, right? You might be thinking to yourself, well, Adesanya beat Anderson Silva, but the Anderson Silva that Adesanya beat was coming off of multiple losses. Now, I'm not going to say that prime Anderson Silva definitely beats those guys, because it goes both ways, but there's no way to know that. This is a different division at this point in the game. Anderson Silva, for the resources available to him, fought in a manner that was most effective for the guys that he was fighting in the era that he fought in. This time travel thing where it's like, oh well, how would Anderson Silva at the age of 30 do against Jared Cannonier? Like, that stuff doesn't make any sense, because, again, like I said, the thing that made Anderson Silva great was not the thing that was getting Anderson Silva losses. At least up to interpretation, because at his best, Anderson Silva came into the UFC and fought just only the best middleweights on the planet, outside of one, the tough winner. Other than that, he was only fighting the best middleweights on the planet. Rich Franklin, you know, Chael Sonnen, and then Vitor Belfort, Damian Maia. He was only fighting the top of the division for the majority of his run, and then he fought Weidman, got his leg broken, and everything happened the way it happened. But why does age always get factored out of this? Like, we're gonna pretend like just because you're 36 but winning, that means you're the same level fighter? You're obviously not, but in this context of MMA, you should be looking at just the run that these guys are on, the age. So for example, if 36-year-old Anderson Silva is undefeated, but his performances and his wins continue on the same trend as they were 26 years old, then that stuff shouldn't really matter to you. But if it is clearly showing that he's barely winning fights against lesser competition on worse runs than the ones that he beat in the past, then you can clearly see a diminishing of his talents. And none of these arguments make sense, because Anderson Silva fought Adesanya in like 2018 I think? 2018 actually. And what, he lost to him? Okay. So what? There's nothing that says a 2014 Anderson Silva would lose to him as well. You have no way of proving that. There's nothing that you have. You can't tell me that Uriah Hall would beat prime Anderson Silva. Or if you do think that, again, there's no way to go either way about it. All we can do is look at the run that these guys went on and who they beat when they beat them. And the performances that they had against those people. Because this time travel stuff doesn't mean anything. Like, Adesanya is given more... Like, for example, right? You can say, well, Adesanya would beat the fighters of old. But really, what does that mean? Adesanya, with the new medical advancements, the new benefit of just knowing what works best for the human body, will use all those advantages to beat people in the past? What if they're given that advantage? This whole thing is really convoluted once you start mixing in narratives. And that's why no actual time traveler argument will ever make any sense. It's just who you fought for the time that you fought them and when you fought them and how you looked when you fought them. That's how the GOAT debate goes. Anyway, dominating the competition available to them. I think I just already went pretty deep into it, so I don't know why I've made this its own slide. But like I said, the competition available to Adesanya was not Khamzat Chimaev. If you think Khamzat Chimaev beats everybody because he has a beard and he comes from the mountains, like a lot of people do, then sure, more power to you. But there's no way to definitively know that. Adesanya's got great takedown defense, and even if we break down the fights itself, you have broken down a fight at some point in your life and thought to yourself, oh my god, this 20 bucks, I'm going to turn it into 40 bucks. Put that money on Sportsbet, checked your phone, watched the fights probably, and saw your guy got knocked out or just completely dominated over the course of the fight. You've done that. You are, unless, like I've said this before, unless you have a 100% prediction rate in every single fight you've ever watched, you really don't have a clue. Really. Like, you don't know on the day how these fighters are going to show up. You don't know what techniques they have. You don't know if there'll be some lapse in judgment. You don't know if Bobby Green will just KO, what's-his-face, Grant Dawson in the first round. You don't know this stuff. This is not a sport where we can look at data across 60 to 85 to hundreds of games. This is a sport where once a year, a fighter will fight maybe 1 or 2 times if they're a champion, fighting the top of the level of the division. And that's what we have to go off of. And that's what we have to think. Okay, 6 months ago, Adesanya was doing this to this guy. So now how will he perform now? That's really what we have to go off of. And there's not enough data for us to be like, oh, well, you know, based on this information, you can make an educated guess. You've been wrong multiple times. And in a sport where one bad decision can lead to a career trajectory change, I'm not really taking your word for it. I'm sorry. Just look at who they fought, when they fought them. I get it. You weren't watching MMA in 2014. I wasn't really following it like that either. But I have the benefit of looking back and seeing the run that these guys were on. Simple as that. Moving along. Now let's look at some other sports. So for mixed martial arts, for some bizarre reason, is the only sport where we're saying Merab Dvalishvili might be a top 5 fighter of all time. I've heard it. I know, and it's Lucas Tracy as well. Lucas Tracy is just out here just making up rules for the GOAT debate with different criterias and all this and that. Will he beat Petr Yan coming off of a 3-fight losing streak? Oh my god, Henry Cejudo, he beat him after he was off for 3 years coming off of a loss to Aljamain Sterling. Looked great in that fight, don't get me wrong, but an older Henry Cejudo. Oh my god, Jose Aldo, again, a good win, Jose Aldo, but not prime Jose Aldo. This wasn't Jose Aldo of his peak that Conor McGregor whooped in fucking 9 seconds or whatever the hell. 11 seconds, I don't remember. It wasn't that. And then he comes out and beats Sean O'Malley, another very good fighter, but once again, it's not the greatest fighter of all time. It's not. Like, you can look at his resume and honestly compare it to someone like Chris Weidman's, and all of a sudden you might be thinking, oh my god, why is Merab better than Chris Weidman? It would have to be the fact that Chris Weidman went on a big losing streak, which again, Weidman was younger than Adesanya and Anderson, but we don't know for sure what changed. All we know is what actually happened. And that's, he started losing fights, but before that he was destroying a lot of people in that division. 2 wins to Anderson Silva, the greatest middleweight ever. Vitor Belfort. Lyoto Machida, who was a good win at that point. I mean, he wasn't anything special by then. But really, like, we're looking at, but if you're going to pull out Petr Yan coming off of a 3-fight losing skid, his only great win in his entire career was an older Jose Aldo at that point. That was Petr Yan's big win at the time. You're really going to be stretching the fucking belief of a lot of people watching your video. And now I just went after Lucas Tracy for some reason, but fuck Lucas Tracy. Anyway, let's look at some other sports. So this is Michael Jeffrey Jordan, considered by the populace. I don't know, listen, this is not a basketball channel, but I don't agree, but for the majority of humankind, he is the GOAT. He's the greatest basketball player to ever play. This was the end of his career. This is what happens when he stuck around too long, came back after 3 years, and gave us some stat lines that were only possible because he was on a terrible team, taking up majority of the shots, being pretty inefficient. In all honesty, 41% from the field, 44% later on. Like, he was not that dude. On any good team, he'd be another role player. Or a third option at best. Maybe something hot off the bench. But that's not who Michael Jordan is. This is another all-time great player, Kobe Bryant. He ended his career because of injuries. The fact that people don't take into account Anderson Silva breaking his leg and then continuing his career while Kobe Bryant tore his Achilles, came back and was not the same fighter, is the dumbest thing I think I've ever heard. And it's only in mixed martial arts because a bunch of randoms who go to the pub to watch the fight commentate on it. And then sometimes every now and then you hear Lucas Tracy because he knows people that watch fights and now he's listening to them. Screw Lucas Tracy again, by the way. Get a beef with me going, Lucas Tracy. I need subs. Anyway, like I was saying, again, inefficient is 35.8%, 37%. That's terrible. Absolutely terrible. And again, only possible the points that he's putting up because of the number of shots he was taking on a bad team, and he was just destroying his team chemistry, by the way. Like, they were just losing games because he would just shoot them out of games. That's the end of Kobe Bryant. I'm sure you've heard the name Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, so I use those two specifically as examples because they're very famous players, and you probably think, oh my god, I've never watched basketball, but they were really good players because I've heard people say that. But that's how their career ended. This is Michael Jordan in his prime. The GOAT run was completed by the time Michael Jordan came back to Washington. Look at that. I mean, the trajectory of his, like, the second three-peat years, obviously, are worse box score numbers. And I think he's a worse player as well, just outside of just the box score. But that was his resume before he ended up coming back to Washington. He was already one of, if not the greatest player to ever play. He never had to come back for that. And nothing after that would change it, because the resume just exists in isolation of its own. That's the version of Michael Jordan that everyone considers the greatest. No one is looking, and to cross-reference that with mixed martial arts, no one is looking at Adesanya losing to Mavov thinking, wow, he just beat the greatest middleweight of the era that I watched. No one's really saying that. Because they know it's not, he's not as good. So all of a sudden this context gets applied to Adesanya. By some people don't. But for other fighters, it's like, oh, well, he lost to this guy, to this guy. Just because Volkanovski beat Max Holloway 3 times, that just takes away the fact that Max Holloway has a far deeper resume. Oh, God. Why do my lights always do this? I guess that's something blasphemous again. I guess it's not a popular opinion to say Max Holloway might be greater than Volkanovski. But whatever. Like I was saying, we continue on. Now that I've made my point clear, I just want to end this video by saying he is clearly the second greatest middleweight of all time, I would say. Just the body of work, the performances that he put on. Some of them were boring, but they were effective in the way that they need to be, right? Like, he's not the most fun fighter ever. Like, fun isn't a determinant of how good of a fighter you are. It's how dominantly you win. And even his boring fights, other than the Yoel Romero one, which, honestly, Adesanya was really playing with fire there. Other than that, the Vettori fight, boring. The Cannonier fight, boring. I get it. Boring fights. But they were both decisive wins. You couldn't say the other person won that fight. So just based on that, he did win dominantly. Your personal preference doesn't supersede the effectiveness of a fighter. So just based on all of that, he's the second greatest middleweight of all time. But is he a top 10 fighter to ever do it? I haven't got a list. I only have my top 6, 7, 8. Listen, he might be top 10, but he's not a god, right? Like, he's not one of the fighters that I considered god in this space. Like, he's an amazing fighter, arguably top 10 ever. Maybe top 10. Again, it's close. Like him, Usman, Volkanovski, Max Holloway. You know, a lot of fighters have put in a lot of work. I've got him above Khabib at least. You know what I mean? For what it's worth, I've got him above Khabib. Islam's on the come up. He might be overtaking Adesanya all time. But again, like I said, if you have him in the top, Matt Hughes. Oh, sorry, I completely forgot Matt Hughes. He's someone I have him in the top 10. That's not a popular opinion, but I don't care. He's in the mix, but I can't definitively say he did enough throughout his career, just because the relativity of the competition that he faced in the middleweight division was a little bit lower than the other divisions. And a sport like this, relative to the era, your division strength does matter. Unfortunately, just because you're not going to be seeing Sean O'Malley fight Israel Adesanya, so the only way to compare is their resumes. And unfortunately, one division is stronger than the other division. But like I said, could he be top 10 ever? Maybe. I think he's on the cusp of it if he isn't. He's top 15. But yeah, that's Israel Adesanya. And that's why the end of your career shouldn't matter. And Adesanya is not going to be superseded as the second greatest middleweight by a random fighter whose career's already ended. Let's say Robert Whittaker. Let's say he goes on to win the... actually, you know what? No. Let's say Luke Rockhold. Or Michael Bisping. Or Rich... whoever. If Adesanya continues to lose, he does not move down in the all-time rankings. He remains there until someone does more than him. A fighter that hasn't fought in years, or will never fight again, cannot overtake a fighter that is currently standing as the second greatest middleweight without fighting. That's just not going to happen. Someone new is going to have to come along and supersede what Adesanya did. Just like I don't think Adesanya can supersede Anderson just because Anderson went on a losing streak. Someone else has to come along and do more than Adesanya. That was the whole video. It really makes no sense to make this video, but I just feel like I just needed to make this video. Like, because the parallels are there between Adesanya and Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva ended his career terribly. If Adesanya does the same thing, I don't think he moves down in the all-time rankings. Screw Lucas Tracy. Screw his dumb logic. Like the video. Subscribe to the video. Share the video. Comment down below. Hit the notification bell. Do all of those things. I'm at 222 subscribers. I really want to get to 250 subscribers. If you can hit the subscribe button, that'd be quite helpful. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.